When I was still married to my military husband, he was overseas and I moved our daughters and myself to our follow-on duty station. I rented a 100-plus-year-old house. It was wonderful, out in a rural area with a huge yard. The only problem was that it had mysterious happenings. One of the things that I soon learned happened on a regular basis was the knocker. The basement of the house was very dark and damp. My washer and dryer and deep freeze were in the basement, so I did have to go down in it quite often. I never allowed my two young children down in it due to the dark and dampness. The only entrance to the basement was a door located in the kitchen. It happened to be right next to the back door, which was also in the kitchen. Not long after we moved in, I heard knocking on the back door. Thinking it must be a neighbor, I went to answer it. As I approached the door, I realized it wasn't the back door. It was the basement door. I knew my children were in the living room and couldn't figure out who would be in my basement. I opened the door to no one. This occurred on a regular basis. At least once a week I heard the knocker. The neighbors and owner of the home knew nothing about it. I also hung a photo of my husband and me up on the wall by the front door. Many mornings, I came in to find it either hanging upside down or lying on the floor beneath one of the chairs or sofa. I would replace the photo and leave it at that. My parents came to visit one weekend. We were sitting in the living room and suddenly we heard knocking on the back door. I tried to ignore it, but my mother insisted on answering the door. I followed her to the door, insisting she just ignores it. She thought I was terribly rude. Then she opened the door. Realizing there was no one there, she literally stalked back into the living room, picked up her purse, and as she was going out the door, said, "Mel, I'll be in the car." He drove her the 3 hours home, and she refused to ever come back. Another time after my husband returned from overseas, we had guests and were sitting in the living room. Suddenly, the husband stopped talking and was staring at the wall next to the front door. He said, "Susan, get the baby. It's time to go home." We followed his stare to the front door and watched as the photo of my husband and myself was slowly turning upside down. There were other strange occurrences, and it soon became apparent that whatever it was did not like my husband at all. If he upset me or the children in any way, things picked up and something bad happened to him. One day, following an argument, he left to drive to a local Kmart. He called me from the store. He was almost to the store when the left driver's side rear wheel came off the truck and he wrecked the truck. He apologized to me. He called the entity Hardy. It followed us to our next base and left when we divorced. I was a toddler, no more than 3 years old, when my family and I lived in a small rented house in Vermont. There are a few things I remember about it. A spiral staircase, a large field. Well, my 3-year-old self thought it was large. The cold cement floor in my bedroom, and a part of the house that I was strangely drawn to, the basement. I was, and still am, a wanderer, and I also didn't mind being alone. Both of those qualities made the basement a sort of getaway. I wasn't allowed down there by myself, but a handful of times I was able to sneak my way down there. I remember crawling down the stairs like they were a ladder, being overly cautious of falling, as I had done before. Sometimes I would hear mumbling coming from somewhere in the basement, but it was too quiet for anything to be discernible. When I got to the last step and turned around, I would see her over in the corner, a mannequin with blonde hair and with an expressionless face. All I would think is she looked like the mannequins in JCPenney or Kmart. I never once thought it was odd she was there. Some basements have exercise equipment. We had a mannequin. Years later, and living in a different home, I decided to bring this up to my mom. Why would we have a store mannequin in our basement? My mother just gave me a strange look, then laughed and said, "We never once had a mannequin in any of the places we've lived in." To this day, I have no idea what it was that I saw. I live in an apartment complex that is pretty upscale. It has plenty of standalone buildings with 4 apartments in each, 2 on the ground floor and 2 on the upper floor. The only thing I don't like is many of the buildings have basements that connect the buildings to each other from the basement doors. All 3 of the other tenants in my building are single girls and I'm a single man. We usually keep to ourselves. None of us are friends or really talk to each other. I think the 3 girls all have boyfriends because they're usually gone most weekends. This incident happened about 4 weeks ago. On Fridays, I usually have a few drinks and play some video games or have a few buddies over. On this particular night, I was alone. I played my Switch and had a few strong beers. I was feeling pretty good and was just sitting on the couch in that sort of, do I have another or do I go to bed? I was playing on my phone for a minute when I heard a pounding on my door. I froze and sat there, not hearing anything else. I yelled, "Who the hell is it?" No answer. Another loud pounding, and I yelled, "Who the F is it?" No answer again. I started to get nervous and slowly got up. I looked through my peephole and saw no one. Since I can't see left or right, I wasn't dumb enough to open the door and look. So I just put the chain lock on, which I barely do because it's instinct for me to lock the deadbolt as soon as I walk into my apartment. Nothing else happened the rest of the night, but I semi-sobered up pretty quickly and didn't fall asleep for quite a while, even though I knew I was safe. The next week flew by and I just forgot about it, thinking it was just the girl and her BF who lives beneath me. They were both potheads and I'd heard and seen them yelling and laughing in the parking lot multiple times before. Another Friday night where I'm drinking and playing video games. Suddenly I heard the booming hits on my door again. This time I shout, "Okay, you're so done." I go grab a knife from the kitchen and as I'm grabbing it, I hear the pounding again. I shout, "Get the F out of here," as I walk towards the door, pounding my feet so they know I mean business. I fling open the door and I hear footsteps going down to the main floor and I decide to follow. Then I hear them going into the basement. I stop when I hear that because I know there's no way I'm going down there. I run back into my apartment, lock all the locks, and go into my porch, knowing I'll see a light go on in an apartment next to mine for whoever it was who just ran home through the basements. No lights come on at all in any of them. This was about 2 a.m. when it happened. Nothing happened last week, but it's the weekend again, and I'm a little freaked out, hoping it doesn't happen again tonight. This time I have a baseball bat right by the door, and I plan on charging out if it happens again. Wish me luck. Most of this story is something my mom told me. When I was in the 3rd grade, my mom had me and my sister move our bedrooms to the basement. I didn't really care, but my sister started to freak out about it. I thought it was because she would have to live in the same room as me. A month into sleeping downstairs, my sister refused to go into the basement hallway by herself. We were both afraid. It was always weird going past the basement stairs. My mom would always say she didn't feel comfortable in that house. She never told us about what she saw or felt because she didn't want us to freak out. This next part is when we moved out to our new house. When we were moving into the house, we had to go back and forth to take showers and such. My baby brother wasn't even a year old yet, and once we set foot back in the house with him, hell broke loose. My brother would start bawling and wouldn't stop till we left the house. About a year into living in the new house, I didn't feel uneasy anymore. I thought it was because I matured, but I was wrong. My cousins came over not too long ago to watch horror movies with us. After the 2 movies, my mom wanted to talk to us about the old house. Apparently, under the stairs, my mom would get bad vibes and feel like something was watching her. At night, she would see a dark figure in the corner of the room looking at her while she was sleeping. The crazy part is that the corner with the dark figure is where I put my bed. Further into the conversation, my mom told me something I would never forget. She told me that I would hear voices coming from the TV, knowing that at this age I was shocked. I asked my grandma a while back how long her family has been following God. She then told me that she didn't know, but she did know her grandma did seances. I doubt that had to do with the figure in our old home, but I never want to go back there again. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night, playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately went and started looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and heard my mother yell out, "Son, Anyone home? I yell back up the stairs. Yup, just hanging out in the basement. I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again. Can you come to help me with something? I need you up here. I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. Yup, give me just a minute. Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. Anyone down there with you? She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends. In the voice, it was just wrong, like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I replied back, just Colton. After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I looked over to where the door to the garage was, and also the kitchen right next to it, and it was black, pitch black, all of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, Mom, where are you? There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicks in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. What's wrong? Colton says. My mom's not home. I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. What do you mean? You were just talking with her? I could see the confusion on his face. There's no one home. We need to leave now. I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I saw my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. Are we leaving? Colton said, still confused as all hell. No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out. I pull out my phone and call my mom, and she picks up immediately. Son, what's going on? She answers. Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there, I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me? I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing, predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. But whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil and it was hungry.